For more, let's bring in George Beebe, a former chief Russia analyst for the CIA and former advisor on Russia to Vice President Dick Cheney. He's also director of Grand Strategy at the Quincy Institute. Also with us, Ivana Stradner, a Russia program fellow at the Foundation for Defense Democracies. Welcome to Saturday Agenda. George, let's start with you. The fact that the meeting happened in the first place was pretty significant, but we're all sort of unclear on what was accomplished. What was accomplished?
Well, I think we're necessarily unclear about what was accomplished because the sides both agreed that they weren't going to make any agreements public. And I think the reason for that is not that they didn't make substantial progress. I think reading between the lines of what President Putin and President Trump both said, I think quite substantial progress was made on what I would call a framework deal to end this war, meaning it's not a full-fledged peace treaty, but it lays out some principles that are going to govern an ultimate deal and codifies some compromises that will, on the one hand, address Russia's core concerns, but also protect the vital interests of Ukraine, the United States, and Europe at the same time. Now, what exactly is going to be in that deal has to be something that the Ukrainians are involved in and sign off on. And I think that is what we're going to see on Monday when President Zelensky travels to Washington, meets with President Trump in the White House, and I think is likely to sign on to this framework that is under negotiation. And at that point, my guess is we will see what the particulars of this framework look like.
Ivana, President Trump taking to Truth Social. Here's what the president said, stating from his phone calls after the summit with Zelensky, various European leaders, and NATO Secretary General, the best way to end the horrific war is going directly to a peace agreement instead of a ceasefire. And we've heard a lot about a ceasefire, even yesterday, now a pivot to the full peace plan. Why the mixed signals there?
To begin with, a whole ceasefire would be a dream come true for Putin because he would use that to buy more time, to reposition his military, to strengthen his economy, and to continue with his conquest. Let's not forget that yesterday, even a Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs showed up in a shirt that showed USSR, the Soviet Union, which tells you really all you need to know about Russian imperial ambitions. And that's precisely why President Trump is absolutely right to push for a long-term solution. My concern is that Vladimir Putin is not a guy who is willing to negotiate in good faith, so we should definitely not fall for his games. And one of those games would be for Putin to push for a deeper U.S.-Russia economic relations, and then just to say, forget about Ukraine, we have more important things to do. We should not fall for this game.
So, George, I think a lot of people were surprised watching Vladimir Putin go after former President Joe Biden. Let's watch this.
In 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. And I can confirm that.
Wow. Your reaction to what Putin said there, George?
Well, I think all along the key to ending this conflict has been a fundamental geopolitical compromise that leaves Ukraine militarily neutral, not a member of any military alliance, including NATO, but allows it to be politically and economically anchored in the European Union, in the West. And I think that is going to be a central element of the deal that ends up ending this war today. Now, if that's the case, that suggests that that same deal was probably viable back in 2022 when the Russians were urging the Biden administration to make that very same compromise. And the Biden administration simply refused to engage. It said that it's not an issue that we're willing to discuss with Russia. Russia has no legitimate voice in what kind of security partnerships or alliances Ukraine might have. Had we changed then, and had we been willing to negotiate on this issue, my guess is we would not be facing the invasion that we have faced since.
All right, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. George, Ivana, thank you both for coming on Newsmax. Appreciate it.